Hey guys, I hope all is well. I got another off-meta build here for you today featuring Invigorating Strike. So this is probably one of the worst skills to center a build around. It would be, however, with the release of Season 5 came a new unique sword called Shard of Verathiel, which gives a huge, massive damage boost to basic skills, allowing them to do insane amounts of damage. But the downside is basic skills now cost 25 primary resource, but lucky for me, Invigorating Strike has built-in energy regen, which is just perfect. With that being said, I'm excited to show you what I think became a fairly decent build with about 40k life, 100 mil DPS to staggered bosses, capable of taking down every single tormented boss and even clip the wings of Uber Lilith, that goddamn flying penguin. So as I showcase later, my gear is very suboptimal with weak affixes, not even fully masterworked or any crazy greater affixes except for my regular sword, and only level 15 glyphs, which just goes to show that there's much room for improvement. As it currently stands, I got up to tier 90 in the pit and was very close to doing tier 6 hordes, but with more optimized gear and more hours into the build, I have no doubt it can get to tier 100 and beyond in the pit and can certainly reach tier 7 hordes. But before I jump into the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think of the build because any feedback is always appreciated. Regarding the playstyle of the build, it's not amazing by any standards. In fact, it's probably decent at best. We are single target melee, so we have to rely on getting AoE and build strong into defensives. As far as AoE goes, before I ever got my hands on a Paingorgers, I was running aspect of volatile shadows on a regular pair of gloves, which caused enemies to explode, and this was good enough to get me through tier 5 hordes and some higher level content. But honestly though, once I got the Paingorgers, it still felt like it wasn't enough, so I kept Volatile Shadows along with the Paingorgers, and the clear speed got much more comfortable since I had two sources of AoE instead of just one. And I pretty much just built stacks of momentum through hits, drop caltrops to mark all enemies, and usually hitting one or two of them will kill the entire pack. And if caltrops are on cooldown or I'm still getting hit, then Volatile Shadows will always be a source of reliable AoE for me and cause more explosions, and it's kind of nice having both. It's definitely good quality of life to have. Regarding the 100 mil DPS on staggered bosses, I pretty much just stacked a boatload of multiplicative damage on enemies with various crowd control effects on them through my aspects, and then damage per dark shroud through tempering is huge for damage as well, and then I build into crit and crit chance for even more damage. Then all of a sudden I start hitting for like 25 to 40, sometimes 60, 70, 80 mil, coupled with my attack speed gets me to roughly 100 mil DPS. For my specialization, I'm running Inner Sight, one because the others don't synergize with our build, and two because it does boost our DPS since we are running crit chance and crit damage, and it definitely helps to have the infinite energy every so often. Other than that, the build does have one problem that I couldn't 100% fix at lower levels without the right gear, which is energy generation. I tried to do what I could, but the only way it feels comfortable to play is if I use a tier 2 elixir of resourcefulness. I think if I built more into plus innervation and tried my best to reach 100% lucky hit chance, then I'd have a much better resource upkeep, especially if I had cowl of the nameless the entire time. Other than that, I was able to get by with the elixir just fine throughout the game. Alrighty, so my gear, like I said, is nothing crazy and doesn't require any expensive budget or anything like that, so it can definitely be a seasonal start character. For my helm, I've got life, res, lucky hit, chance to freeze, and mired sharpshooter's aspect to activate tricks of the trade on my Paragon for DPS. For my chest, I've got life, res, armor, chance to freeze, and plus to dark shroud, and umbrous aspect to generate more dark shrouds on critical strike chance. For my gloves, I'm using Paingorgers. However, before I got Paingorgers, like I said, I was using this, which had life, crit chance, crit damage, chance to freeze, damage per dark shroud, and aspect of volatile shadows for AoE. So this is a pretty decent pair of DPS gloves to use before getting Paingorgers that got me through the game and made this build pretty budget friendly to start off the new season and allowed for some smooth gameplay. For my legs, I've got life, res, chance to freeze, max res on potion, plus to invigorating strike, and frostbite aspect for DPS. Now, I wasn't going for max res on potion, I was actually going for max life on dark shroud, but it doesn't matter that much. I got two greater affixes on this thing, which I bought for 25 mil, which I honestly probably probably overpaid for since no one else would be interested in legs like this since no one ever runs Invigorating Strike as a main skill ever. For my boots, I'm currently running Penitent Greaves, but before I got that, I was running Rakonaut's Wake because it's a general good pair of leveling boots since it has movement speed, all res, cooldown reduction, and increased non-phys damage. And before I got that, I was running a regular pair of boots with life and movement speed and with undying aspects for extra life regen. For my amulet, I've got increased all damage, crit chance, plus the frigid finesse, invigorating strike energy regen, and damage per dark shroud. This is by no means a strong DPS amulet, but I do think it's a fairly decent one that synergizes pretty well with our build, and also it's got aspect of adaptability for DPS. And I did opt to go for invigorating strike energy regen instead of plus innervation just so I can test things out. And like I said, you know, it's not perfect, but it did get me through the game. For my first ring, I've got life, crit chance, crit damage, plus the innervation for energy regen, damage per dark shroud, and aspect of volatile shadows for that extra AoE that I was talking about earlier. So I have the volatile shadows here with the Paingorgers for that double AoE. For my second ring, I've got life, increased all damage, crit chance, invigorating strike, energy regen, damage per dark shroud, and aspect of true sight for DPS since we are running inner sight as our specialization. For my two-handed, I am running a bow instead of a crossbow because the bow gives extra crit damage and we don't need vulnerable damage from the crossbow. And the bow's got life, plus to all damage, crit damage, caltrop duration, damage per dark shroud, and aspect of moonrise for DPS. One thing to note is they nerfed caltrop duration, so there's a cap on how much damage it can provide through duration, and stacking duration no longer gives any benefit in terms of damage. I only get one duration affix to keep it around longer than it takes to come off cooldown. For my first sword, I am using a suboptimal Shard of Verathiel with only +1 to basic skills, so it's nothing crazy. I dropped one early on in Hordes at like 705 item power, so I can start using it right away, and then I got this one in like tier 5 Hordes in like my 90s. And for my second sword, I got very lucky and dropped this triple greater affix sword with life, dex, and crit damage. I put caltrop size on it for quality of life and damage per dark shroud, and it's got aspect of cold clip for DPS and building stagger since our skill now does cold damage instead of physical damage, which is pretty damn sweet. Lastly, for my jewels, I got rubies for max life, skulls to hit armor cap, a diamond to hit res cap, and topazes for increased basic damage. Alright, so for my skill tree, you just max out Invigorating Strike. Then I put 1 point into Sturdy just so I can get Siphoning Strikes for some healing on the side. And I am running Shadow Step up to Methodical Shadow Step for the damage reduction. And then of course you max out Weapon Mastery and you go Caltrops into Methodical Caltrops for the chill and cold damage, and this damage will activate Paingorgers, so that's also really nice. Then I got Unstable Elixirs, which is an amazing new addition to this season, just some really good free damage. And then Trick Attacks gives a bunch of crit and crit damage, and then I also go Dash into Enhanced for the extra crit chance, and then I max out Dark Shroud into Subverting Dark Shroud for some extra life sustain, and then I got Smoke Grenade into Countering Smoke Grenade, which is really nice because of the cooldown reduction, especially if I'm hitting a pack of elites during hordes, then it pretty much instantly comes off cooldown and ready for me to use it again right away. Then of course you max out exploit and malice as is mandatory and staple for any rogue, and then I do spec into cold imbuement just so I can spec into mixed cold imbuement for that extra times damage to crowd controlled enemies. Double this against frozen enemies, so basically 40% times damage to staggered bosses, which is absolutely insane damage. Then of course 6 points into Frigid Finesse, which is really good for damage. I get +3 from the amulet, so this is 60 times increased damage against staggered bosses, which is absolutely insane as well. And then I got +6 into Innervation for extra energy regen, and I also do put 3 points into Alchemist's Fortune for extra lucky hit chance, and since our damage is non-physical due to our cold clip aspect. And then I got Second Wind for an extra 18k life every time I spend 100 energy, which is basically every 4 to 5 attacks. And then I am running Momentum instead of Close Quarters Combat because of the damage reduction and the energy regen. Also, Close Quarters Combat only currently gives me 17 times increased damage, but with 10 stacks of momentum I get 50 times increased damage, which is a lot better. For my Paragon board, we are running 6 boards in total with 6 different glyphs. So for my starting board, I am running Closer for the reduced damage taken and increased cutthroat damage, which is basically just damage. Then I move into Eldritch Bounty, which I have spec'd a lot into. So I thought this was really good because our skill is imbued. It's cold imbued due to cold clip aspect, so it will get the benefits from this. So pretty much +3 max cold res and then 20 times increased cold damage, which is really nice. Then I get imbued damage here and plus non-phys damage here. This is really big for damage. Then I come here for the max life, and then I get this little cluster for the damage taken over time reduction, and I have socketed combat for the extra crit damage, and because it also restores 12% of energy loss on critical strike, which is pretty nice. Then coming here, I get Tricks of the Trade, which is activated by my Mired Sharpshooter. So Caltrops becomes a marksman skill. So every time I cast Caltrops, I'm getting 25 times increased damage to my Invigorating Strike, which is absolutely amazing. And I've also socketed Devious for the times increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Then coming down here, I have Cunning Stratagem, but I've only come down here for the extra damage to basic skills and the extra plus damage, and I've socketed Canny for the multiplicative non-physical damage taken increase. Then coming back up here, we have Cheap Shot for the increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies, complemented with Control, which further boosts that damage. And then lastly, we have No Witnesses, where I socket Fluidity because agility skills like Dash and Shadow Step and Caltrop will give me multiplicative damage and multiplicative energy regen, which I thought would be really nice. So all in all, I still did end up having to use an elixir of resourcefulness, but it ended up being pretty smooth either way. So if you don't have a cowl of the nameless, then you can run all of these like energy regen stuff and it will get you by. Alrighty, so there you have it. Here's my character. I did manage to find better Paingorgers and this damn near perfect Shard of Verathiel and even a cowl of the Nameless, which is huge for damage and lucky hit. So I might test these out and try to upgrade these on the side just to personally see how far I could take the build. But other than that, here is the Uber Lilith kill, still the hardest and most annoying boss fight in the game. And I think they made it even more annoying this time around because you can't kill it for some reason at the very end, and it's always gonna do its like final attack rotation. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time.